Yeah, so it's always a challenge, and there is no secret formula to figuring out the hiring process.
How do you identify the specific skills and qualifications required for a particular role? I know that you have managers, for example, you have processing employees, you have delivery drivers. What, how do you qualify those and identify those skills and requirements?
Throughout the hiring process or while working with us. So similar to what John spoke about, we use an applicant tracking system. We've used Hire Pro, ZipRecruiter, Breezy, you name it. We've used quite a few of them, and they're very informative, and they have a lot of pieces in play that you can use. And one that we use quite often is called a questionnaire. So they fill out an application, and it will either send them a link, or after they fill out the application, it asks them a series of custom questions, and we craft those questions to identify the key things that we're looking for. And we're not asking like how many pounds can you fold in an hour, or have you worked in a laundromat. Our best team members have zero experience in a laundromat. They've worked in like the hospitality industry or the food industry. So we'll put questions on there like, how do you work? Are you a team player? How do you work with other people? Have you played sports before? Scenario-based questions, how do you handle this type of situation? Clients upset at the counter because the credit card machine is not working and they're in a rush. So we ask them these different questions, and that questionnaire helps us to get a better picture. So we've gone from like really high level detailed job ads to now we just go to bullet points. And it's just like, here's the salary, this is the location, this is what you're required to do, this is the position, click this link to apply. And then that link drives them to our applicant tracking system.
I love that. And again, you mentioned some really great tools, Hire Pro, ZipRecruiter, Breezy, just to get those applicants in the door, but understanding the profile of the employees that have been successful for you and your business and trying to recreate that magic, I think is so critical. And I loved the suggestions that you had made or the questions that you ask about sports, team, hospitality, customer service facing. So many of these things are so critical when you're on a small team, and when you are trying to provide a luxury service to anybody who's walking in the door. So, having somebody understand how to engage with those customers and provide the best experience is so critical. It's a reflection of you and your brand and your company.
Yeah, like I know, I'm like, they're not going to make it, or they're going to be a rock star, or they'll be good. First week, like couple days in, like the way they come in the door, they show up on time. Do they bring something to write with, like a pen and a paper? All these little telltale signs tell a lot.
Waleed, I've had the pleasure of visiting the Soapbox, and I feel that there is a really incredible dynamic amongst the staff there, and I get the sense that a lot of them have worked with you for a long time, and I don't know if that's just how comfortable they felt, or if they've actually been there for a long time. So when you're looking for your candidates, are you looking at that long-term commitment, retention, and what are those maybe magic factors that you're looking at to identify those qualities?
Yeah, so I used to have this checklist, and then after somewhere in my career, after I did probably like my 1000th interview, I threw it out the window. There are certain things that we look for, like do they show up on time? What's their appearance like? We've had people show up in interviews with three-piece suits on, and then I've had other people show up like they just came from the gym. And the one in three-piece suit totally bombed, and the one that looked like they came from the gym was a rock star. Like there's no perfect checklist anymore. It's things have changed so much. So one of the things that I do is I'm very upfront in an interview. The first thing I tell them is like, you're not here for an interview. We're two adults having a conversation about entering into a long-term employment relationship. And I tell them long-term for me is, a year to 2 years. If I'm not expecting you to work here the rest of your life, if you choose to, kudos to you. Like we'll rock this out together and like dominate the industry in our market. Otherwise, like let's just make the best of the time that we're together. And the goal is for you to leave here better than you came in. So I tell them that straight out. We're having a real conversation. I was like, I'm straightforward with you, you be straightforward with me and we'll figure out a good path forward. Otherwise, we'll just shake hands if there's no meeting ground and no hard feelings. And the second thing we do is I have another team member sit in on the interview so we can get a different perspective. So it's not just my perspective, because my team is going to spend more time with that person than I do. I'm at the store now way less than I used to be in the past. Thank goodness, because the team is doing a great job. So it's removed me from that equation. The other thing we look for is do we get along with the people? And you mentioned it, Simon, when you were at the store. Everybody felt like they've been there for a while. The longest person has been there maybe our manager, I think 3.5 years. I'm horrible with time, so forgive me. And then some of the other team members have been there maybe a year, 6 months. It's a range. But in that interview, we're looking to see would I go hang out with this person after work? Would I want to go eat dinner with them? Do we get along? We're in a small space and we work close together. So one of the key things is we're looking for, do they have a great personality? Are we going to have fun while we're working with them? If not, we're yeah, they're really good. They know what they're doing, but it's just probably going to bump heads later on. So yeah, I would say those are probably the top 3 things we're looking to check off: their personality, another team member signs off on them, and then just how they carry and present themselves throughout the interview. I shouldn't say the interview, throughout the discussion.
Waleed, you famously say you have tried every single system out there. You have, had the soapbox now for over 7 years and, many, many staff, I'm sure, just over that course of time. So what does training look like for a new employee joining the soapbox team?
We must remember this as operators and owners. It's always evolving. And no matter what we put in place today, there's going to be some changes, additions, or some caveats to it down the road. I'll get phone calls during the week. They're yeah, somebody brought in this item and it's not listed. Or one of our commercial clients, they're sending in other items that are not in their current price tier. And we have to, make adjustments to the SOPs and to the dashboard for them to be able to get those items. So when it comes to training, the first thing we do is they work one-on-one with somebody for the first 2 weeks. We use a couple of the same technology platforms that John mentioned. Loom is awesome. Do screen recordings of, how do you work the register, or how do you work the tablet, et cetera, or any other tech pieces that you have on the back end that they have to interface with. We also use one Scribe, so it's easy to capture screenshots and then put them into a manual, whether it's printed or digital. Notion is huge for us. We document all the SOPs and everything in Notion, so it's easy for them to access. And we also use Slack. So all those are the 4 basic things that they use during the training period. There's videos for them to see whether the video is a screen recording or actually doing something in the store. So they can log on after hours or during hours when it's slow, go into Notion, pull up that video that's listed in the SOP that says, how to rack an order, or, how to separate the order that's under the minimum, etc. So a lot of that is documented either in written format or in video and images, which we found is tremendously helpful for them. And then they shadow for 2 weeks. And then during the first week, we're telling them and we're showing them. And then the second week, they have to show us everything that we showed them the first week. And we'll typically go, we might go 3 weeks, 2.5. If they don't have it by a week and a half, 2 weeks, we're yeah, it's probably not going to work. Because there's a lot of moving parts on our side because we're doing 3 service lines: dry cleaning, laundry, and sneakers. So they have to be very mindful of, different fabrics, different sneaker types, customer service problems, etc. But the shadowing I found is the biggest piece for us that works. They're hands-on, we're showing them and we're letting them do it as we go through every process.
Absolutely. And, Waleed, you've obviously have had your staff. Are you always having a posting out there, or what's that situation like for you?
The experience we've had, and I've cross-referenced this with our other business where we're constantly hiring because, again, people are a product at that business, so we have to constantly hire. I found that when we turn it off and then we turn it on later on, we see way more attention, we see way more influx. And it's that whole supply and demand. When it's always up, people are just yeah, it's there. They become numb to it. But when we shut it off, and we turn it back on, the floodgates come. Like listen, I hear people all the time telling me, and I'm not disagreeing to a certain extent, I can't find people, the market is tight, et cetera, et cetera. I hear you, but I don't hear you. And what we do is we use Craigslist. That's going to cost you a little bit because you got to pay for job ads. And people will tell me, oh, Craigslist sucks, Waleed. We don't get enough people or they're not quality. Listen, every market is different. I can only speak for in New York. I put an ad on Craigslist and it's how you manipulate it. We'll put it up first on Mondays. People are like, oh, no, you put it up on Fridays because the weekend people search for jobs. Wrong. People look for jobs on Monday because when they go to work, they hate their job. Like they're searching the job boards on Monday. Trust me when I tell you. Yeah. I've experimented with every day of the week. So first we put it up on Mondays. We'll put it up Sunday and then I'll put it up again Monday. So I'm catching people like, oh, I don't want to go back to work, and they start searching. Craigslist will get a few good hits, but we get a lot of people and it spreads the word. Then Indeed, free 99 again. Go on Indeed, create your company account, create your company page. You can put videos from YouTube, you can put photos, all your history. You can put a whole bunch of information that pushes you up. You'll get a ton of people coming from Indeed for free. If you want to spend a couple bucks, then you'll get even more people coming. But the key is, how do you filter all those people so you're not going crazy? You set up Indeed with Calendly, free again, and you set up all your links. You put the questionnaires in Calendly if you didn't do them in Indeed or one of your ATSs. It pre-screens people. And listen, don't bring people to your store right away. Have them interview the first interview over Zoom. Like, don't waste your time setting up a bunch of interviews. You go to your store and these people don't show up. Like, I've been ghosted so many times on interviews. Like, we're waiting, people show up, they don't show up. I set up a Zoom link and I set them up in 15, 20-minute increments, back to back to back. They show up, oh yeah, we talk. I'm like, all right, that sounds good, good vibe. Can you come to our store next week? Sure. Can you come to the store tomorrow or Saturday? They come to the store, we sit down, it works. Then we send them an offer letter. So like, we show them that we're serious. Everything is written, it's documented. Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot the question. Like, I just got on a rant.
I lost track of whether we were talking about dating and dating apps or applying for jobs, because I will say every single thing that you said, get off the apps, get back on it. Like, you talked about ghosting, how do you filter? Like, all of these things really apply to that world as well.
But like, you bring up a good point. If you look at finding team members like you date, like it's a big correlation between the two, and which is why I tell people in the interview, like, no gimmicks. No, I had a driving instructor when I took the road test to get my license many years ago, and the driving instructor, I got in the car, and this dude, like, he had a long day, and he did not want to be bothered with me driving this car around the block. He closed the door, he put in a seatbelt, he said, I'm gonna tell you right now, sir, no gimmicks, no games, no jokes. Drive this car, don't break any rules, and you've got a license at the end of this test. And from that day, I was like, you know what? He was straightforward. I knew what his expectations are. He told me exactly what he wanted. And I was like, I need to take that into every interview. I'm not trying to like butter people up or sell them on some pie in the sky to get them to come. And then they come and be like, you don't have 401k, or you don't have this, but in the ad you said this, or in the you led me to believe that. No, like, this is what it is. You're gonna be working in a 700 square foot store. We're gonna be on top of each other. We're gonna have fun. You're gonna make some money, and we're moving a lot of dirty underwears. You down for that or what? That's it.
Yeah, Indeed. And then Indeed you mentioned, but also one important part about Indeed you mentioned was getting your company account and your company page up to par. I think that's, by the way, everybody here, if you have a laundromat, it's not just with Indeed with hiring. Get your Google My Business page set up, become a legitimate business, like any person who's going to be applying, hopefully is doing their due diligence. Make yourself presentable with your internet presence, Google yourself, see what comes up, and make sure that it's something that is appealing to any candidate coming in.
Here's one thing.
You also mentioned Calendly.
Oh yeah, Calendly, sorry. But here's one thing people should use that doesn't get talked about a lot in our industry. We aren't doing background and reference checks. Like, people walk in and we're just like, okay, yeah, you want to work in a laundromat? Like, why are we lowering our standards so much? Like, I understand people like, oh, it's a shortage, I really need people. But we use Checker. It's super inexpensive and it's really fast. And we run background checks on individuals. Like, it says something to them when they have to go. And you'll be surprised. Like, we have people, when they find out they had to go through a background check, like in the middle of the application, they just get up and walk out the store. Like while they're in the waiting area waiting to have an interview. And I'm fine with that. Like, they've just saved us so much time. Like, background checks, do them.
Yeah. And
John's shaking his head.
I ask people before I get into it, listen, I am going to run a background check. Is there anything you need to talk to me about before I run it? And
Great
I
point.
had one girl not tell me anything, and then I had to not offer her a job because she got busted for shoplifting, which is a red flag. I had another guy tell me, well, I have a couple things. Yeah, a rap sheet as long as my arm. I'm like, no. That's not a couple things. That's a lot of things. And so, and you look at it, you have a fiduciary responsibility to give your employees and your customers a safe place to be. And how are you going to look, if one of your employees beats up a customer? That'd be a little bit of a public relations and legal problem. And so, you owe it to yourself and to everybody involved to make sure it's safe.
Yeah, and the background check, right. John brings up a good point. The background check doesn't mean because something comes up, you disqualify them. That's just another talking point. And when you use a background check software, it has a feature in it. When it discovers something on their background, you hit a button and it sends them this thing called, I think it's called like, tell us the story, the way they have it worded. And it's basically explain to us what happened in your words, and then you use that to have a different conversation.
Absolutely. And just to reiterate, that's Checker, background checks. And I love the feature of like, tell us the story of what happened. And I also just want to reiterate, I think you said something that was very beautiful, Waleed. You said, don't lower your standards in this industry. I think across the board, that is generally a mentality that people have. It's a laundromat, whatever. No, don't lower your standards. Make it the best place to work. Make it the best service that anyone can provide, and make people want to come and be there and work there. And let's make it sexy. Outside of that, I did want to talk a little bit about incentives, how we are incentivizing our employees. So I am curious, and John, I'm going to point this to you first because you've talked about incentives also for Google reviews. You just opened up your doors. So I think that this is also super important to hear. But what kind of incentives outside of an hourly wage are you offering to your employees right now?
So I have two programs right now. We pay 5% of every wash, dry, fold order that they process. And so that gets factored into the biweekly paycheck. And experience-wise, I look at the CEO's store in Jacksonville. I sat down with one lady. She's been there a couple of years, and the lady could fold like there was she was a machine. Her base is at a 14. She was making an average of 24 an hour because she could process. She was doing way better than 50 pounds an hour, and she was good. It was the most beautiful stuff I've ever seen. So that's part of what. And the premise there is, if my business grows, your paycheck should grow along with it. Second thing I have in place is an incentive program on a quarterly basis for 5-star reviews. Employee who gets the most 5-star reviews that mention them specifically gets an extra bonus. And so that's got everybody, jumping in. In 6 weeks, we've got close to 60 5-star reviews, which is, it comes and goes, but it's certainly an incentive. And then in my case, I use the rollover for business startups. So I actually do have a 401k. And so, there's an eligibility period they got to work before they can contribute, but it'll have employer match as well.
And Waleed, same question for you. Outside of an hourly wage, are you incentivizing your employees, and what does that actually look like?
Yeah, so I agree 100% with what John said, the incentives that he has and the structure he has in place. So we've recently stopped all incentives, not recently, but a couple of years ago, we actually stopped. And we're looking at the data and we're talking to our team members, and it's a little different mindset for us. And it was we've noticed some of the team members, there were bonuses involved. Like they were chasing, if you ever seen that cartoon or that drawing where there's a carrot on a stick in front of the horse, and the horse is just like steady going because they're trying to get to this carrot, but it's like, just keep dangling it, they never get it. So we would see team members who did like really well because they were chasing the money. But then after time, we would see, oh, when they hit a certain threshold, it was just volume, 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 and quality kind of, even though we had checks and balances, we saw the quality kind of just diminish. Or they were like, oh, can you write a review? Because they were like, oh, I need to get this review so I can get this extra money. So we kind of removed all that now. We're looking at it from a different perspective to say, who's a team member that fits what we're doing, who's going to give this great service like 80, 85% of the time, and be well-rounded, and we just need to figure out how often do we need to increase their wages. So some of our team members, we put straight salary. We're like, listen, this is it. You keep doing that. You got nothing else to worry about. Here's straight salary. I don't care if you work 30 hours a week. I don't care if you work 40 hours a week, you work 15 hours a week, you take some time off, I'm still gonna pay you that same rate because of what they were producing and doing for the establishment. So we're in that zone right now looking at the dynamics and the data from that. And then we'll probably end up settling on some kind of hybrid model. We use a lot of the incentive programs inside our payroll software, which I think a lot of laundromats need. Like I just sent a long email to a colleague of mine who we had a discussion at Excellence. Like we should be rocking payroll software to make our lives so much easier. So we use Gusto, and there's a lot of features inside of Gusto. So we send them a survey every week that they fill out when they get paid in the app. So it takes a gauge on how they're feeling about work, their sentiment, etc. And then there's other pieces inside of it like 401k, there's the health care, there's a lot of features that are like, and you pay at a fractional cost. Like I would give a heads up to, and this is off of hiring, but it's tied to it, workers' comp insurance. If you're not looking at your workers' comp insurance as a pay-as-you-go, I'm not saying you should do it, I'm encouraging you to look at it. Our old workers' comp policy, I had to pay you had the premium for the year and you made the monthly payments, and then you had to get the audit every year. If you didn't do the audit, like your stuff would shoot up. I'm just gonna tell you right now, I switched to pay-as-we-go through our software, payroll software. And when I canceled our old policy, they had to write me a $7,000 check because we were paying, the way they had our workers' comp structured, you pay every month and then you do this audit at the end of the year. And they're like, oh, so you only have this many people, you hired only this many. It's such a old way of doing it. But look at the features that your payroll system can offer. So some of those features that help our team members, we offer direct deposit. And a lot of our socioeconomic base that we bring on as part of our team, they're unbanked. So then they end up going and getting, I won't mention any names, but they get these pay cards from these check cashing places or some of these other institutions, and the fees are ridiculously high. And it's like all these hurdles for them to use that card. Our payroll system has a card, like the most they pay is like $2.50, depending, what the ATM is or something like that. And they can have a virtual account and get a card, even if they can't get bank with a traditional bank. So we found like putting some of those mechanisms in place to stabilize their back end, their life situation, and make those things that we all take for granted. Let's be clear, we take them for granted, like having direct deposit, having a debit card, having a checkbook, et cetera, using Zelle, and et cetera, et cetera. We take that for granted. So putting a lot of those things in place, I think, helps them out a lot.
I think that is such a good point. Outside of the financial incentives, just the incentives to have more access to your funds, which again, like you said, is something that we take so for granted. Love that you have moved some employees to a salary model because that works for you. And that's something that you've had to evaluate and that you've had to change over the years. I also love the employee survey that you're doing on a weekly basis. Again, yes, that's facilitated through Gusto, which is an incredibly easy to use. We used to use it here. Incredibly easy to use software. I highly recommend looking into it. Love the advice as well, everyone who's listening, to take a look at your workers' comp insurance and, potentially explore switching to pay as you go. I feel like a Geico commercial, but 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on workers' comp insurance.
More than 15%.
Yeah, way more than 15%. And then a couple of other things that I know of that we're not talking necessarily about financial incentives, but just again, quality of life, potentially incentives. We know a company, also a startup, it's called Claire. And what they do is you can always look into them. They allow hourly workers to get paid same day. For example, they will basically front it
Yep.
onto a card and you can do same day payments instead of having to wait for your paycheck to come in on a weekly, biweekly basis. Chime is an incredible banking solution as well. If they don't have a bank, just providing these resources to your staff can also be an incentive in and of itself.
Yeah, just ask them. They'll tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, really, what we think they want, like, we're probably wrong 70% of the time. Like, I'll survey, or we have store conversations, they say like, oh, we just want a water cooler. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have to give you a raise, you just want a water cooler? Or like, they work late, I have Uber take them home. So what an Uber cost me, 12, 15, 20 bucks, depending where they live in Brooklyn. And they're just as happy for that recognition, or someone just showing that they worked late and we put them in an Uber, or they come to the store early and the Uber picks them up at their house and brings them to work because there's a problem with the train. Like, we think all these other things in our mind they want to raise, or we need to give them all these bonuses. Sometimes they just want the recognition or like the pat on the back